On July 10th, 1856, in the quiet village of Smiljan, a child was born who would one day change the course of human progress. His name was Nikola Tesla. At the time, Smiljan was part of the Austrian Empire, a remote, rural place where candles still lit homes. That night, a violent thunderstorm rattled the skies with a fury that shook even the bravest villagers. As the midwife helped deliver him, a bolt of lightning struck nearby, casting an eerie glow into the room. Startled, the midwife whispered, "This child will be a child of darkness." His mother, Nikola Tesla, never hesitated. Still in pain, still clutching her newborn son, she calmly responded, "No, a child of light." That moment would become legend, but it also carried emotional weight. In a world without electricity, where light came from flame, the idea of being born with lightning felt supernatural. Tesla would grow up never forgetting that story. To him, the moment wasn't a myth, it was a sign. His identity, his future, and even his inventions were forever tied to that storm. It didn't just mark his arrival, it defined his destiny. Outside, the storm raged on. Wind rattled the wooden walls of the house. The few neighbors who had gathered quietly crossed themselves, unsure of what kind of child had just entered the world. Inside, Nikola didn't cry for long. His eyes, pale and bright, wandered the room in an almost unnatural calm. Some said even as a newborn, there was something different about him. Something sharp, something curious. Whatever it was, the people who were there remembered it for the rest of their lives. Smiljan was far from the lights of the world, and no one would have expected that anything great could come from such a remote place. Yet, it was from that same kind of village that many quiet revolutions began. With his birth, Tesla didn't just enter the world, he entered it with drama. The storm wasn't just weather, it was a theater, and perhaps it was a mirror of what this child would one day bring to the planet: shock, awe, power, and illumination. Tesla was born into a household that didn't fear the unknown. His parents were thinkers, and his upbringing was full of both structure and imagination. His father had strong religious values and a passion for words. His mother, creative and observant, lived by instinct. Between them, a strange harmony existed, discipline and creativity under the same roof. From his first days, Nikola was being shaped by opposing energies. And just like the storm outside, those forces would collide, then fuse into something spectacular. That story, the lightning, the midwife, the declaration of light, became more than just a family memory. It became a prophecy. Tesla carried it with him wherever he went. He didn't simply believe he was different. He believed he was meant for something. Born in a moment when light cracked the sky, he would spend his life trying to bring that light to everyone, everywhere. Nikola's father, Milutin Tesla, was a Serbian Orthodox priest and a gifted writer with a sharp mind and strict values. He could recite entire pages of ancient texts from memory and often wrote sermons with poetic clarity. Milutin believed deeply in faith, education, and moral discipline. He expected obedience and structure in his household, and while he loved his children, he rarely showed it with softness. From a young age, Nikola was pushed to read, recite, and reflect. His father wanted him to follow in his footsteps, to preach, to write, and to speak to crowds. But in the same house, under the same roof, lived a very different kind of influence. Nikola's mother, Georgina, or Juka, had no formal education, but her intelligence was obvious to anyone who knew her. She could memorize epic poems after hearing them once. She crafted household tools from scratch. She fixed things most people would throw away. Without knowing engineering theory or math, she understood mechanics through instinct and trial. She invented without ever calling herself an inventor. To young Nikola, she was quietly brilliant. While Milutin gave Tesla a world of ideas, Juka gave him the confidence to create his own. She never discouraged his questions, no matter how strange they sounded. When he took things apart to see how they worked, she smiled rather than scolded. When he stayed up late thinking, she brought him food without speaking. She didn't need to understand his mind to know it was rare. And Nikola watched her, not just for what she made, but for how she thought. At the dinner table, the family often debated topics ranging from theology to poetry to natural phenomena. The house was filled with books, voices, and ideas. Nikola learned to listen before speaking. He learned to question without fear. He learned that imagination had a place even in a religious household. That blend of freedom and tradition would stay with him for the rest of his life. It helped shape not just his thinking, but his character. Tesla once said, "My mother's influence was stronger than my father's in many ways." While Milutin pushed boundaries with words, Juka did it with her hands. Nikola absorbed both styles. He became someone who could dream and build, someone who could imagine without forgetting to test, and most importantly, someone who could believe in impossible things without losing his grip on reality. He didn't see the world the way it was. He saw it as it could be. That early foundation, a disciplined father, a visionary mother, a house filled with thought, was the soil where Tesla's mind began to grow. He was taught to memorize, to question, to build, and to believe. These weren't just parental lessons. They were tools he would carry into every invention, every failure, and every victory. From as early as age 5, Nikola Tesla began experiencing strange flashes of light that came with vivid mental images. These flashes often came suddenly, triggered by strong emotions or sudden stimuli. He would see images of places he had never visited and machines that didn't yet exist. These weren't dreams or fantasies. He claimed they were complete visual blueprints. He didn't sketch ideas first, he saw them, perfect and moving in his mind's eye. His photographic memory was equally astounding. Tesla could memorize entire books and recall them line by line, page by page. He didn't just remember words, he remembered patterns, shapes, and even complex calculations after seeing them once. This made him excel in school, but also made him stand out in a way that wasn't always comfortable. Teachers didn't know what to do with a child who could correct them. Peers didn't understand how he always seemed 2 steps ahead. But his gift wasn't always a blessing. The visions often overwhelmed him. He would cover his eyes, curl up, and wait for them to pass. He described it as a blinding light that brought entire moving systems into view. Cogs, wheels, pistons, functioning perfectly. It scared him at first. He didn't know if others saw the same things. When he realized they didn't, the world felt more isolating. His family didn't dismiss his experiences. They may not have understood, but they listened. His mother encouraged him to keep observing. His father, while confused, began to realize this wasn't just imagination, it was intelligence. Over time, the flashes became something Tesla learned to control. He started using them. Instead of avoiding them, he welcomed them. His mental laboratory became his most powerful tool. Unlike most inventors, Tesla didn't need trial and error in the physical world. He would test an idea in his mind for weeks, run simulations, spot faults, and adjust all without touching a single part. He later claimed this ability saved him years of wasted effort. To him, imagination was real. Vision was reality waiting to happen. His mind wasn't just a tool, it was a fully functioning workspace. Even in play, Tesla was building systems. He observed water flow to understand energy. He studied gears and wheels to imagine movement. He looked at shadows to think about time. Everything he saw was data. Everything he imagined had purpose. The line between thinking and creating was almost invisible. He wasn't just daydreaming, he was designing the future in silence, inside his own mind. When Tesla was just 5 years old, his older brother Dane died in a terrible accident. Dane was everything a parent could hope for. Brilliant, composed, and full of promise. He was considered the star of the family. the one who would achieve greatness. Nikola adored him, he looked up to him, he followed him. But one day, that future was suddenly erased. Dane died after falling from a horse. Some say Nikola witnessed it. Others say he only saw the aftermath. Either way, the trauma ran deep. The house changed after that. Joy was replaced with silence. Milutin and Juka, once so strong in their roles, were broken in ways they didn't show publicly. The loss left a shadow on every room. For Nikola, it was more than grief. It was confusion, guilt, and fear. He started asking questions about life, death, and meaning. Questions far beyond his years. He withdrew further. He spoke less. His mind grew louder. Whispers in the village suggested Nikola may have startled the horse that caused Dane's fall. There's no proof of this, but children absorb blame even when it's not spoken aloud. Whether real or imagined, that guilt stuck to him like dust. He never spoke openly about it, but the weight of it lived in his eyes. The one person he admired most was gone, and in his absence, people turned their attention to Nikola. Not with excitement, but with expectations. Tesla responded by diving deeper into his mind. The visions intensified. The need to create became urgent. He wasn't just curious anymore. He was driven. His brother's death didn't just change his emotions. It reshaped his purpose. It taught him that nothing was guaranteed. Not life, not love, not time. So he stopped wasting any of it. He began walking alone in the countryside, watching birds and water, following the shape of clouds. Nature became his refuge. Silence became his language. And invention became his therapy. He wasn't healing. He was transforming, turning pain into purpose, absence into ambition. The boy who had once followed Dane's shadow was now chasing something only he could see. By the time Tesla was 8, he had begun experimenting with anything he could find. He played with insects, water, wind, and pieces of scrap metal. But this wasn't idle curiosity. He was observing, testing, and recording, even if no one around him noticed. He built small water wheels and placed them in nearby streams, watching how force turned into motion. Every discovery led to a new question. Every mistake sparked a new idea. He became obsessed with magnets. He carried them in his pockets, using them to test attraction and resistance. He placed them near nails, coins, or his family's tools, trying to map invisible forces. He wasn't just playing, he was exploring. Each pull, each snap of connection between objects was a step toward understanding something deeper. He wasn't afraid to fail. In fact, he expected it, because failure gave him data. Tesla watched birds fly and wondered if people could do the same. He observed the way wings tilted in the wind, the way feathers shifted in air. These weren't just animal movements to him. They were systems, and they fed into his growing ideas about vibration, frequency, and balance. Even as a boy, he didn't just see behavior, he saw potential. He built rudimentary machines out of sticks and string. He tied insects to small boards and tried to mimic flight. Most of these devices broke, but he learned something from each one. It wasn't about success, it was about progress. Every idea was a question being asked, and every failed invention was a new answer found. He wasn't waiting for science class to teach him, he was discovering it himself. The force that drew him in the most, though, was electricity. Even before he understood its science, he felt a connection to it. It reminded him of thought, fast, quiet, unseen, but powerful. He once saw a spark jump between two metal tools and stared for several minutes without speaking. Not because it scared him, but because it confirmed what he'd always felt. The most powerful forces in the world are the ones we can't see. This belief would define his life. Tesla wasn't chasing fame or fortune, he was chasing understanding. And he knew, even as a child, that the world only pays attention to what it can touch. But he believed in the power of the invisible. And in doing so, he began to show the world how to believe in it too. In 1875, Nikola Tesla enrolled at the Polytechnic Institute in Graz, Austria. He was 19, full of curiosity and hungry to learn. His chosen subjects were electrical engineering, mathematics, and physics. From the start, he stood out. While other students followed lectures, Tesla absorbed them like air. He didn't just memorize, he challenged. When a professor explained that direct current was the only workable system, Tesla raised his hand and asked, "What if it's not?" It wasn't arrogance, it was vision. Tesla became obsessed with alternating current during a lecture about a Graham dynamo. As the professor showed how the device worked, Tesla saw inefficiencies. The commutator, designed to reverse current, seemed unnecessary to him. Later that night, he told a classmate he could build a motor that didn't need it at all. No one took him seriously. But that idea, the rotating magnetic field, became the core of his later inventions. He had no blueprint, just his imagination and the belief that nature had a better way. He studied long hours and rarely slept more than a few hours each night. His professors noticed his dedication, but worried about his health. He would walk for hours reciting entire books from memory. His photographic recall was nearly flawless. While most students used textbooks, Tesla barely touched his. He could remember every formula and every diagram after one read. It was impressive, but it also isolated him. His brilliance became a barrier between him and others. Tesla's relationship with his professors began to strain. They admired his intelligence, but didn't appreciate being challenged in public. He asked questions they couldn't answer and proposed designs they thought impossible. He started to feel out of place. Some classmates admired him, others avoided him. Tesla didn't care. He wasn't there to impress anyone. He was there to solve problems he couldn't stop thinking about. And that need, that constant buzzing in his head, wouldn't let him rest. By his second year, Tesla was already thinking far beyond the course material. He sent letters to his father, claiming he was passing 9 exams in a single term. But that intensity came at a cost. He began showing signs of burnout. He stopped attending church, avoided meals, and began walking the streets alone at night. Professors warned him he was pushing too hard. He didn't listen. He didn't know how to stop. The questions in his mind were louder than anything outside it. Tesla never graduated. After losing his scholarship and falling into debt from gambling, he dropped out of the university. His family believed he was still enrolled. He hid the truth, ashamed. What began as a promising academic journey had become a silent collapse. But though his education had ended formally, Tesla's pursuit of knowledge was only getting started. After leaving school, Tesla spiraled into one of the darkest periods of his life. He suffered from mental exhaustion, chronic insomnia, and periods of confusion. He could not stop thinking. His mind raced with visions, designs, and theoretical machines he couldn't explain to anyone. He wandered through cities and villages, often without a plan. He slept very little, sometimes walking all night just to tire himself out. The world around him faded into background noise. Inside, a storm was building. At times, Tesla considered taking his own life. He later admitted to coming close on multiple occasions. But even in his despair, he couldn't let go of his ideas. They clung to him. One moment, he was weeping over failure. The next, he was sketching circuits in the dirt. The mind that gave him brilliance also refused to let him rest. And in those early years, it nearly broke him. But somehow, even in his weakest moments, he kept chasing something he couldn't quite define. During this time, Tesla's physical health declined rapidly. He developed strange sensitivities to sound and light. A simple ray of sunlight would feel like a blade to his eyes. He couldn't bear to wear earrings or jewelry. The touch of another person sometimes triggered pain. Doctors didn't understand what was happening. They thought it was psychological. Tesla believed it was neurological. Whatever it was, it isolated him even further. But even in that isolation, his mind kept building. He took long walks through forests and open fields, trying to calm his nerves. During one of these walks, he began to believe that energy could be harnessed directly from nature, from the earth, from the sky, even from the vibrations of people. He couldn't explain it yet, but he felt it. In those solitary moments, he started piecing together the beginnings of something that would later change the world. Not because anyone taught him, but because his suffering forced him to think differently. Eventually, he began spending time in libraries, reading anything he could get his hands on. He didn't care about topics. He just wanted input: biology, chemistry, mechanics, even poetry. He believed the mind needed variety to stay alive. But he still lacked purpose. He still felt like a man with too much vision and no path to follow. It was like carrying blueprints to a city no one else believed in. Then came a turning point. He read about electromagnetism in greater depth, and it gave him a focus again. He started sketching more detailed machines, not just visions. His energy returned slowly. His appetite, his strength, his clarity. He wasn't fully recovered, but something had shifted. Tesla had hit rock bottom, and now, slowly, he was beginning to climb. In early 1882, Tesla was walking in a park in Budapest with a close friend, reciting lines from Goethe's Faust. It was something he often did when his mind was overwhelmed. But this time, something unusual happened. As he spoke the lines aloud, "The glow retreats, done is the day of toil." Something clicked. In a sudden burst of mental clarity, he saw it. Not just a vague idea, but a fully formed image. A motor. One without brushes. One without a commutator. He stopped walking. His eyes widened. "I've got it," he whispered. His friend looked confused. Tesla sat down on the bench and began sketching the machine with a stick in the dirt. It was the rotating magnetic field, a concept no one had been able to make work. In that moment, without tools, without lab equipment, and without funding, Tesla solved one of the biggest challenges in electrical engineering. "It was like lightning in my mind," he would later say. This was the moment that would define the next phase of his life. With that single mental flash, Tesla laid the foundation for alternating current, the system that would eventually power cities. But at the time, he had no way to prove it. No lab, no funding. Just a vision and a heartbeat that wouldn't slow down. His friend tried to keep up, but Tesla was already lost in the geometry of spinning fields. He spent the next few weeks drawing the design over and over. In his mind, he ran simulations, adjusted variables, and tested outcomes. He didn't need a prototype. He was the prototype. He carried the machine with him, constantly perfecting it. Every walk was a calculation, every meal a distraction. He barely slept, afraid the image would leave him if he let his guard down. But it never did. It stayed. What made Tesla different wasn't just that he had the idea. It was that he could hold it. Most people get flashes of inspiration and lose them. Tesla locked his in place. He didn't chase the idea. He carried it with him until the rest of the world was ready to see what he saw that day on the park bench. This was no ordinary breakthrough. It wasn't random. It was the result of years of suffering, thinking, and relentless curiosity. That flash on the park bench wasn't magic. It was the reward for surviving a mind that refused to sleep. And it was only the beginning. After his breakthrough in Budapest, Tesla finally started finding his way into technical jobs. He took a position at the Budapest Telephone Exchange, which was still in its early stages of development. At first, he worked on small repairs, but soon his talent became obvious. He improved the equipment without being asked. He increased the clarity of the telephone lines, and he built a new kind of amplifier that made calls more stable. His work impressed his employers, but they still didn't fully understand what he was capable of. Tesla quickly became known as someone who could fix what others had given up on. He didn't follow manuals, he rewrote them. He didn't patch problems, he redesigned systems. Eventually, he was recommended for a job with the Continental Edison Company in Paris. The company built and maintained electric lighting systems based on Thomas Edison's designs. Tesla accepted the offer and moved to France in 1883. In Paris, Tesla worked as an electrical engineer, traveling to different cities to install lighting systems. While others focused on getting the job done, Tesla looked for ways to improve efficiency. He noticed flaws in the Edison dynamos. He made suggestions. Some were adopted, others were ignored. But every day he learned more about the practical limits of direct current. And every night he dreamed about alternating current, the system he still hadn't built. During one project in Strasbourg, Tesla was given the opportunity to repair a damaged dynamo. Instead of just fixing it, he rebuilt it entirely and improved its output. The local officials were stunned. They called his work genius. But even then, no major company offered him support for his alternating current idea. He kept waiting for someone to see what he saw, but no one did. Not yet. His supervisors respected his skill, but found him difficult to manage. He talked more about inventions than deadlines. He focused on theoretical solutions when the company wanted practical fixes. Eventually, it became clear that if he wanted to bring his ideas to life, Europe wasn't the place to do it. Too many people were committed to the old way. Direct current ruled. Tesla was a stranger in a system that didn't want to change. By late 1883, Tesla made up his mind. He would leave Europe. He would try America, the land of Edison, the land of opportunity. He didn't know anyone there. He didn't have funding. But he had his design, his vision, and one letter of introduction. That was enough. In 1884, Tesla sold nearly everything he owned and boarded a ship to the United States. He carried with him a suitcase, a few drawings, and a letter of recommendation addressed to Thomas Edison. The letter was from Charles Batchelor, a respected engineer who had worked with both men. It simply read, "I know of two great men. One is you. The other is this young man Tesla had never even seen Edison." But that letter was his key. The only thing standing between him and complete anonymity. The trip was rough. Tesla arrived in New York City with 4 cents in his pocket, a small package of poems, and one change of clothes. He was 28, tall, thin, and completely unknown. But he wasn't nervous. He was focused. This was the moment he had prepared for. He believed in the power of his idea. He believed he had something America needed, even if it didn't know it yet. New York City in the 1880s was booming with electricity projects. Streetlights were going up. Factories buzzed. The city was alive with invention. But it was also dominated by Edison and his direct current empire. Tesla entered this world quietly. No press, no fanfare, just a man with a dream and a letter. When he finally met Edison, the two shook hands. Edison reportedly glanced at the letter and said, "So you're the one who can do the math." That first meeting didn't lead to immediate trust. Edison had little interest in alternating current, but Tesla got a job at the Edison Machine Works, helping with motor repairs and dynamos. He worked long hours, earning his place. He didn't talk much about his own designs, not yet. He waited, he observed, and in the back of his mind, he still carried the motor he had seen years ago on a park bench. Tesla's journey from a park in Budapest to the streets of New York was more than just a move between countries. It was the shift from vision to reality, from solitude to challenge, and from the background of European invention to the center of the American Industrial Revolution. He wasn't there to blend in. He was there to change everything. In 1884, Nikola Tesla stepped onto the busy streets of New York City for the first time. He carried a small suitcase, a rolled-up coat, and a single letter of recommendation addressed to Thomas Edison. He didn't have money or friends, but he had something stronger: belief in his idea. At 28 years old, Tesla had already imagined a future powered by alternating current. Now, standing in the city run by Edison's direct current systems, he was ready to challenge the giant. The letter from his former supervisor read, "I know of two great men. One is you, the other is this young man." Tesla was introduced to Edison, who listened to him with polite disinterest. Edison had no time for theories. He valued practical results. But Tesla's background and Batchelor's praise were enough to earn him a job. He was hired to work at the Edison Machine Works, helping improve generators and troubleshoot field problems. From the beginning, their working relationship was strained. Tesla respected Edison's business success, but found his ideas narrow. Edison saw Tesla as brilliant but difficult. They were different in every way: method, style, and vision. Tesla immediately dove into improving Edison's DC generators. He made more than 20 practical upgrades, making the systems more efficient and reliable. He worked days and nights without complaint. Edison was impressed and reportedly promised him a $50,000 bonus if he succeeded. Tesla took the offer seriously. He believed it was a deal between men of invention, so he delivered. The systems worked, the performance improved. Tesla expected the reward he was promised. When he approached Edison to collect, Edison laughed it off. "You don't understand our American humor," he said. Tesla stood stunned. To him, that wasn't a joke. It was betrayal. The money wasn't just about wealth. It was about being taken seriously. It was about integrity. And in that moment, Tesla realized he couldn't continue working under someone who didn't value what he brought. He resigned from Edison Machine Works shortly after, walking away from a steady paycheck and a powerful name. Tesla's exit wasn't dramatic, but it was personal. He had crossed an ocean to prove his worth, and now the man he thought might help him had become a wall in his path. Edison believed in the system he built. Tesla believed in a system not yet realized. That clash of ideas, born in an office and buried in a handshake, would become the center of one of the most important technological battles in history. The War of Currents had quietly begun. Tesla left Edison's company with no job, no savings, and no lab. But he still had his vision, and that, more than anything else, would keep him alive through the darkness that followed. Out of work and far from home, Tesla had to survive. Despite his background as an engineer and inventor, he found no one willing to back his vision of alternating current. So he took a job digging ditches for $2 a day, laying underground cables for Edison's own system. It was hard, filthy work. He labored in the cold and the heat, breaking ground for someone else's dream. But he never let bitterness take over. Even as he worked with a shovel, his mind stayed in motion. Each night, exhausted and sore, Tesla returned to his boarding house and continued sketching his designs. His alternating current motor still lived inside his mind. Whole, spinning, perfect. He couldn't afford tools, but he could build it in his head. He adjusted dimensions, tested the sequence of electrical phases, and fine-tuned balance points. It was all theoretical, but Tesla's theory was more complete than most men's prototypes. Even in silence, he was making progress. Tesla's physical health suffered during this time. He barely ate, slept little, and pushed himself beyond what most could endure. Yet, he never considered giving up. He saw the hardship as a phase, temporary, necessary. He had gone from theorist to laborer, but he refused to become invisible. The power of his vision kept him upright. He knew what he had, and he believed someone, someday, would too. In 1886, that day came. Through a mutual acquaintance, Tesla was introduced to Alfred S. Brown, a lawyer, and Charles Peck, a wealthy investor. Tesla pitched them his alternating current system. He spoke carefully, explaining not just the motor, but the system behind it. Transmission, distribution, everything. At first, they didn't understand the details, but they understood Tesla's intensity. He didn't sound like a man trying to sell something. He sounded like someone trying to change everything. Brown and Peck agreed to fund a small laboratory for Tesla in Manhattan. It wasn't fancy, but it had the tools he needed. For the first time, he could build the motor that had lived only in his mind. And when he did, it worked. The motor spun, powered by the alternating flow of energy just as he had imagined. It was quiet, smooth, and unlike anything anyone had built before. It wasn't a theory anymore, it was real. Tesla had gone from a ditch digger to a man with a working prototype and financial backing. He had proven that resilience, belief, and sacrifice could lead back to invention. Now it was time to bring his ideas to the world, and that would require a bigger stage. In 1887, with the support of Peck and Brown, Tesla founded the Tesla Electric Company. The lab became a place of focus and rapid progress. With funding secured, he developed several versions of his alternating current motor, each more refined than the last. His goal was to create not just a motor, but a complete electrical system. He understood that power generation, transmission, and conversion all needed to work together. This wasn't about parts, it was about the future. Tesla began conducting demonstrations for scientists, engineers, and potential investors. He powered motors using polyphase alternating current, something no one else had done. These motors ran more efficiently, generated less heat, and needed less maintenance than DC systems. The demonstrations were simple but compelling. He let the results speak for themselves. Observers were stunned by the elegance of the design and the silence of its operation. There were no sparks, no noise, just motion and power. He filed several patents that same year. Each one was clean, original, and covered critical elements of the AC system. The patent office approved them quickly, recognizing their strength. For once, Tesla was not just an inventor, he was a patent holder with legal protections and a working product. His ideas now had teeth. They were no longer vulnerable to theft or dismissal. The next challenge was scaling. Tesla Electric Company wasn't equipped to build massive generators or install nationwide systems. Peck and Brown began searching for a partner who had both the infrastructure and the appetite for risk. The name that kept coming up was George Westinghouse. He was known as a bold entrepreneur, the man who had revolutionized railroads with his air brake and now had his eyes on electricity. In 1888, Westinghouse sent engineers to evaluate Tesla's patents. They returned with a simple message: they work. Shortly after, Westinghouse himself came to meet Tesla. He saw the motors, asked questions, and then made an offer. He would license the patents, pay Tesla $60,000 up front, and offer a royalty for each horsepower generated using the system. It was the opportunity Tesla had been waiting for. That handshake between Westinghouse and Tesla would become one of the most important business deals in American history. Together, they were about to challenge Edison's empire. The battle for the future of electricity was no longer just theory, it was about to go public. George Westinghouse was not afraid of a fight. He had already taken on entrenched industries and won. When he saw Tesla's work, he knew AC was the answer to large-scale power. He licensed the patents and immediately began building infrastructure around them. Tesla moved to Pittsburgh for a short time to help adapt his designs to industrial needs. The collaboration was intense, practical, and focused. Together, they were building something Edison had never imagined: a system that could power entire cities efficiently and affordably. Westinghouse invested in transformers, generators, and transmission systems. He hired engineers and began installing AC in real locations. Factories, theaters, and buildings started using Tesla's system. It was reliable and powerful. Unlike DC, which required a generator every few blocks, AC could travel miles. It was cheaper to install and easier to maintain. And more importantly, it worked. People noticed. Tesla was energized. For once, his ideas weren't being dismissed. He was invited to speak at engineering conferences, where he explained how polyphase systems worked and why AC was more scalable than DC. He spoke plainly, with confidence. No tricks, no exaggeration, just facts. He brought diagrams, models, and live demonstrations. He didn't just present an idea, he presented the future. Edison, meanwhile, was watching all of this unfold with growing frustration. His company had invested millions in DC systems. Changing direction would mean admitting defeat. Instead, Edison doubled down on his message that AC was dangerous and unreliable. But Westinghouse wasn't backing down. And Tesla, though often quiet in public, stood firmly behind the science. He believed that results would win, not rumors. By late 1889, Tesla's name had become tied to a new era of power. He had gone from an unknown immigrant to a key figure in a national movement. And he had done it without compromising his ideas. Westinghouse gave him freedom, credit, and resources. It was a rare relationship, one based on respect, not control. Together, they weren't just building machines, they were building a revolution. But Edison wasn't finished. He had one last weapon, public fear, and he intended to use it. Unable to win on efficiency, Edison launched a campaign to make alternating current look deadly. He began funding public demonstrations where animals were electrocuted using AC. Stray dogs and cats were taken from shelters and killed in front of audiences. Edison wanted the public to associate AC with pain and death. The displays were brutal and theatrical. He even went as far as to electrocute an elephant to make his point. The climax of this campaign came with the development of the electric chair. Edison, through surrogates, helped introduce it as a humane form of execution using alternating current. The first execution was a disaster. The condemned man convulsed violently, and the process had to be repeated. The headlines were horrifying. Edison hoped the public would blame AC for the brutality. His message was simple. This is what Tesla's current can do. Tesla refused to respond with counterattacks. He believed the public would eventually see through the manipulation. Instead of fighting fear with fear, he continued working. Every new building powered by AC was proof that the system was safe. Every successful installation was a rebuttal to Edison's claims. He focused on results, not spectacle. Westinghouse, however, did push back. He funded articles, scientific reviews, and public demonstrations showing that AC could be safely used in homes and businesses. The smear campaign slowed progress, but it didn't stop it. People began to question Edison's tactics. Many saw them as desperate and cruel. Gradually, public opinion began to shift. Edison's empire was no longer untouchable. Behind the scenes, Tesla continued to refine his inventions. He worked on transformers, generators, and new methods of distribution. He was more than a figurehead, he was the system's architect. The war had taken a toll, but it hadn't broken him. If anything, it made him more focused. He wasn't fighting for revenge, he was building for the future. As the 1890s approached, the war of currents had turned from an engineering debate into a national power struggle. But Tesla had proven something critical. He didn't just have a theory, he had a working system, a trusted partner, and a growing list of real-world successes. The tide was turning. And soon, one event would push the battle to its tipping point. In 1893, the city of Chicago was chosen to host the world's Columbian Exposition. It was set to celebrate the 400th anniversary of Christopher Columbus's arrival in the New World. But for the millions of people who would attend, it became a showcase of something even more powerful: the future of electricity. George Westinghouse and Nikola Tesla teamed up to win the contract to light the entire fair. This was a bold and risky decision. Their alternating current system was still seen by many as experimental and dangerous, while Thomas Edison's direct current had already been widely adopted. The stakes were massive. The fairgrounds would need to power over 100,000 incandescent lamps. If anything failed, it wouldn't just be a technical issue, it would be a public embarrassment. The contract was worth over $500,000, and behind the scenes, Edison and his allies did everything they could to make AC look like a reckless gamble. But Tesla and Westinghouse pushed forward. They built massive generators at the fair, designed from the ground up to run on Tesla's polyphase AC system. For the first time in history, a major public event would be powered entirely by alternating current. When the switch was flipped on May 1st, 1893, the world gasped. The entire fairground lit up in a sea of electric white light. People stood speechless, looking at buildings glowing brighter than anything they'd ever seen. Newspapers called it the City of Light. Over 27 million people visited the fair and experienced the power of Tesla's system. It was no longer a debate in the lab. AC had won on the biggest stage possible. Even Edison couldn't deny the spectacle. The success at the fair was more than a technical win. It was a cultural shift. People began to believe that electricity could be more than just light in a room. It could change cities, industries, and lives. Tesla became a name people remembered. No longer just an eccentric inventor, but a man with a vision that worked. Westinghouse was hailed as a brilliant industrialist, but even he admitted that the real star was the Serbian engineer with a mind that never stopped. After Chicago, orders poured in for AC systems. Businesses, factories, and cities all wanted what Tesla had proven. The fair changed Tesla's life forever. But while the crowd cheered and the press celebrated, he was already thinking ahead. He wasn't interested in stopping with electric light. He wanted to send power through the air. Shortly after the fair, Tesla shifted his focus again. He wanted to figure out how to send electricity without wires. That idea wasn't just bold. To most people, it sounded impossible. But Tesla believed that if he could create high-frequency currents and amplify them, he might be able to broadcast energy the way others sent signals. He got to work, experimenting with oscillators, transformers, and coils. What he came up with would become one of his most iconic inventions, the Tesla coil. The Tesla coil was a new kind of electrical transformer, capable of producing extremely high voltages. It could create bolts of artificial lightning several feet long. The visual impact was extraordinary. Sparks flew, lights lit up without being connected to anything, and metal objects hummed with invisible power. Tesla started demonstrating the coil in public. Audiences were stunned. It wasn't just science, it looked like magic. These demonstrations made him famous. He invited reporters to his lab and showed off the coils, sometimes letting lightning arcs pass through his own body. He became known as the man who could control electricity with his hands. Photos of him sitting calmly while massive sparks flew around him went viral, or at least as viral as anything could in the 1890s. People were fascinated not just by what he was doing, but by who he was. Tall, thin, sharply dressed, and always intense, Tesla fit the image of the mysterious genius perfectly. The coil wasn't just a showpiece. It helped Tesla develop ideas about wireless communication and energy transfer. He believed that the Earth itself could conduct electrical signals, and that towers placed around the globe could send power anywhere. While others were still focused on copper wires and power poles, Tesla dreamed of a world connected through invisible waves. He filed multiple patents, each one adding to the growing pile of inventions with his name. But patents weren't what drove him. He said many times that he didn't care about money the way others did. What mattered was the pursuit of knowledge and the chance to turn big ideas into reality. The Tesla coil was just one step towards something even bigger. By the mid-1890s, Tesla was more than just an inventor. He was a celebrity. The press couldn't get enough of him. He was giving interviews, speaking at lectures, and appearing at dinner parties across New York. His ideas were strange and exciting, and people loved the sense of mystery he brought to science. He spoke about a future filled with flying machines, wireless communication, and energy beamed through the sky. Among his many admirers was the writer Mark Twain. Twain had long been fascinated by science and had heard of Tesla's work. The two became fast friends. Twain would visit Tesla's lab often, sometimes acting as a guinea pig for experiments. In one famous moment, Twain stood on a vibrating platform Tesla had built, claiming it cured his constipation. The two laughed like schoolboys. Their friendship added to Tesla's public image as a charming, brilliant oddity. Tesla also became a regular guest at New York's high society salons. He spoke in perfect English, carried himself with grace, and could talk about literature, philosophy, and engineering with equal fluency. People found him magnetic. Women wrote him letters. Men offered him business deals. He dined with the city's most powerful people, including financiers and politicians. But even among all this attention, he remained focused on his work. He often declined offers to settle down, start a family, or run a company. He said he was married to science. Those close to him noticed he didn't eat much, rarely slept, and kept to a strict personal code. He refused to shake hands. He disliked pearls and would sometimes walk out of a room if someone wore them. To some, these were signs of obsession. To others, they were signs of genius. What made Tesla different was not just his mind, but his motivation. He wasn't trying to beat others for profit. He wanted to give the world something that could make life better. His growing fame helped spread his ideas, but it also started attracting people with agendas of their own. As his name got bigger, so did the expectations placed on him. One of Tesla's most important victories came not on a stage, but in a power plant. At Niagara Falls, a massive engineering project had begun to harness the energy of the waterfall and convert it into electricity. There were skeptics everywhere. No one had ever attempted to transmit electricity from such a large natural source across long distances. It would be the true test of whether Tesla's AC system could scale up beyond cities and fairs. Westinghouse and Tesla worked together again. This time, they had to build a plant strong enough to capture the power of the falls and then send that energy to Buffalo, over 20 miles away. Using Tesla's patents and engineering designs, the team created powerful generators unlike anything the world had seen. They completed the plant in 1895. The results were historic. The generators roared to life, and electricity flowed across the transmission lines. Homes, streetlights, and factories in Buffalo lit up using power from water. It was the first large-scale hydroelectric station in the world, and it worked on Tesla's principles. Cities around the world started planning similar systems. What Tesla had imagined in a moment of insight years earlier was now changing how entire nations powered themselves. Niagara made it official. Alternating current wasn't just viable, it was the future. Even former critics began to change their tune. Engineers, architects, and city planners started asking for AC systems. Tesla had become the most important inventor in the field of electricity. And this time, the recognition wasn't just in the press, it came from his peers. After Niagara, Tesla began to believe that anything was possible. If power could be sent over 20 miles through wires, why not send it across oceans without them? He saw the Earth as one big conductor. If he could just find the right way to transmit the signal, no one would ever have to pay for electricity again. That dream was bold, and it was about to take over his life. In public speeches and interviews, Tesla began speaking openly about wireless power. He said it was possible to send energy through the atmosphere the same way people sent sound through telephones. People were skeptical, but they listened. Tesla had already proved people wrong before. Why not again? He said the Earth could act as a giant conductor, and with the right tools, energy could be pulled from the ground and broadcast through the air. No wires, no limits. Entire towns, even remote villages, could have light, heat, and power. His goal was not just technical, it was humanitarian. He wanted to bring power to everyone, rich or poor, no matter where they lived. To make it happen, he needed a tower, a large, powerful structure that could send signals across great distances. He began planning what would become the Warden Tower. The project would need money, land, and time. Tesla reached out to financiers and got backing from J.P. Morgan, one of the most powerful men in America. The plan was approved. Tesla started work on Warden with full confidence. He believed this tower would change the world. He hired workers, ordered custom parts, and built a lab on site. He spent hours on calculations, wiring, and tuning. To him, Warden wasn't just a machine, it was the future. But as the costs rose and the tower remained unfinished, questions began to emerge. Investors wanted to know how it would make money. Reporters started asking whether Tesla was chasing something that couldn't be done. He insisted it was real. He said he had already transmitted power without wires in experiments. But this time, the stakes were higher. Tesla didn't back down. He gave interviews, made speeches, and promised a world where wires were obsolete. He imagined people carrying handheld devices, communicating wirelessly, pulling energy from the air. In many ways, he described the modern world before it existed, but as the chapter closed, the pressure on him was building. His biggest idea was still just a dream. The next step would determine everything. Nikola Tesla had always dreamed beyond wires, beyond walls, beyond continents. In 1901, with the financial backing of the wealthy financier J.P. Morgan, Tesla began constructing a massive tower in Shoreham, Long Island. It wasn't just any structure, it was Wardenclyffe Tower, a towering instrument designed to transmit wireless electricity and communication signals across the entire globe. The concept was breathtaking. A world powered without cables, with messages leaping across oceans through the air. It was a direct evolution of the work he had done with alternating current and the Tesla coil. Tesla believed this tower would become the heart of a connected, electrified planet. Construction began with urgency and excitement. Tesla hired some of the best engineers and workers to bring his vision to life. He pored over blueprints, adjusted designs, and walked the dirt paths around the tower each morning with a notebook in hand. His plans went far beyond simple wireless communication. He envisioned wireless lighting, global radio, and even free electricity that could be accessed anywhere, by anyone. At a time when most people were still getting used to electric bulbs, Tesla was already living 50 years ahead. But his ideas, while brilliant, came with a massive price tag. J.P. Morgan had agreed to fund the project under the impression it would make him money through wireless communication. Tesla, on the other hand, had a deeper motive. He wanted to give the world free, unlimited energy. This difference in intention would soon create tension. Still, Morgan invested $150,000, a huge amount at the time, trusting Tesla's genius would deliver a profitable return. For a brief period, everything seemed possible. Wardenclyffe began to rise, a metallic skeleton that symbolized progress and imagination. Tesla believed energy could be drawn from the Earth's magnetic field and transmitted wirelessly through the atmosphere. He wanted Wardenclyffe to become the first node in a global system, like a massive conductor reaching into the sky, spreading power to every corner of the planet. He once said, "When wireless is perfectly applied, the whole Earth will be converted into a huge brain." But as construction costs soared and questions mounted, investors started growing uneasy, and J.P. Morgan, a man known for controlling interests, was about to turn his back. By 1905, with the tower nearing completion, Morgan suddenly pulled all financial support. He discovered Tesla's ultimate goal, free energy for the entire planet. Morgan reportedly asked, "Where do I put the meter?" He didn't see profit in a world where power couldn't be sold. Without Morgan's funding, Tesla scrambled to secure additional investors, but most turned away. Despite his fame and brilliance, Tesla was now viewed as unstable, too idealistic, and possibly unmanageable. The tower stood silent. Construction stopped. Tesla wrote desperate letters to Morgan and others, trying to revive his dream. But the industrial world had moved on. Edison was still powerful. Westinghouse was now a businessman. Tesla, isolated and consumed by his vision, was slowly losing everything: his money, his support, and eventually the very tower he had built to change the world. The collapse of Wardenclyffe wasn't just financial, it was personal. Tesla had poured everything into the tower: his ideas, his reputation, his health. When the funding vanished, it wasn't just the construction that stopped. Something inside Tesla cracked. He continued to visit the site, inspecting the base, checking his instruments, staring up at the immobile steel crown that once promised revolution. Each day it stood unused. It felt more like a monument to lost hope. He didn't give up easily. Tesla tried repurposing the project for wireless communication, hoping to attract new interest from newspapers or the military. He even offered the system to other countries, imagining it as a tool for global diplomacy. But the world was changing. The media began labeling him as eccentric. Investors wanted fast returns, And more than anything, they feared his desire to give power away for free. In the world of capitalism, that made Tesla dangerous. By 1917, with unpaid debts and pressure from creditors, the US government demolished Wardenclyffe's tower. They feared it could be used by German spies during World War I, but that was just a surface reason. The real story was simpler and sadder. No one believed in it anymore. Tesla wasn't even notified until after the tower was torn down. He had failed to save his greatest creation. The destruction was quiet, almost surgical. No headlines, no resistance, just the fading of a dream. The years following the collapse of Wardenclyffe marked a turning point in Tesla's life. He stopped speaking publicly as often. The sparkle that once followed him into scientific circles now dimmed. He was no longer the showman who lit up the World's Fair or created lightning in his lab. He became more reclusive, more misunderstood. The man who had electrified the modern world now lived in its shadows. The sabotage of the dream didn't come from enemies or rivals. It came from a system that couldn't understand a man who didn't think in profits. Tesla's mind was too far ahead, his ideals too pure for the industrial age that had birthed him. And in choosing not to compromise, he lost everything. But even as Wardenclyffe fell, his vision refused to die. People would later argue about what could have happened if Morgan had kept funding him. Could Tesla have changed the world with free energy? Could war have been prevented with global communication? These questions became legends, and Tesla, once considered a prophet, was now being slowly erased from the story of the 20th century he helped create. Before Wardenclyffe, there was Colorado Springs, a chapter of Tesla's life that would later be revisited with a strange twist. In 1899, Tesla had spent several months in Colorado building a laboratory to experiment with high-voltage wireless power. There, he witnessed electrical phenomena that no one else had seen. He created artificial lightning, some bolts stretching over 100 feet long. He even caused a power outage in the entire city after one massive discharge. The Earth itself, he believed, was capable of conducting electricity. But during those experiments, Tesla claimed something unusual happened. He reported picking up a signal, a rhythmic, structured series of pulses. To him, it didn't seem random. It felt intentional, like a message. Years later, he would say he may have received communication from another planet. The idea was wild, controversial, and mocked by the mainstream press. Yet Tesla, ever confident, believed it deserved study. "The feeling is constantly growing on me," he wrote, "that I had been the first to hear the greeting of one planet to another." Back then, most people didn't take him seriously. Radio technology was still in its infancy, and the idea of extraterrestrial communication sounded like science fiction, but Tesla held firm to his belief. He thought the universe was alive with energy, sound, and thought. His lab notes from Colorado Springs became sacred to him. He revisited them often, convinced they held secrets the world wasn't ready for. Even as his finances collapsed, he preserved those documents with obsessive care. As Tesla's reputation declined, the story of his alien signal became a punchline in some circles. But others quietly admired his bravery. He wasn't afraid to follow where logic and observation led him, even if it meant ridicule. In later years, long after Tesla had died, some scientists would revisit his claims with new tools. And while nothing conclusive was found, they acknowledged he had recorded something real, a mystery still unsolved. The connection between Colorado Springs and Wardenclyffe is deeper than most realize. Both were built on belief in wireless energy, in global connection, and in unseen forces guiding the universe. Tesla believed in more than machines. He believed the world could be awakened through frequency, harmony, and purpose. His downfall was not that he lacked evidence, but that the world wasn't ready. In his final years, Tesla spoke less of alien contact, but the press never let it go. They called him mad, a fallen genius. He rarely responded. His silence was not surrender, it was fatigue. The world had laughed at his warnings, ignored his breakthroughs, and now even mocked his imagination. But to the end, he believed in what he had heard out there, in the ether. After the failure of Wardenclyffe, Tesla never built another large invention again. His ideas continued, notebooks filled with sketches and theories. But they stayed mostly on paper. Without funding, he couldn't bring them to life. By the 1920s, he was bankrupt. Once courted by industrial giants, he was now living in modest hotels around New York City, often skipping rent, depending on occasional speaking engagements and small consulting gigs. He became deeply isolated. Friends from earlier years were gone, retired, or dead. Younger scientists looked to Einstein and quantum mechanics, leaving Tesla behind. Newspapers occasionally ran stories on him, usually strange ones, about his fear of germs, his obsession with the number 3, or his emotional attachment to pigeons. Few remembered the man who changed the world. He was now the forgotten wizard, misunderstood and dismissed. Tesla found peace in solitude. He walked to feed pigeons in Bryant Park every day, especially one white female pigeon he claimed to love like a person. He said she came to him when he was sick and comforted him when he was alone. In his eyes, she was more than a bird. She was a companion, maybe even a symbol of purity in a world that had betrayed him. He once said, "I love that pigeon as a man loves a woman." Science had moved on, but Tesla hadn't. He still believed in wireless power. He still believed in global harmony through frequency. But the tools, funds, and audience were gone. He wrote letters to governments, to corporations, to anyone who might listen. Most were ignored. The man who once lit up the skies now lived by candlelight. In those final years, Tesla's mind was still active. He spoke of death as a transition, not an end. He believed energy never disappeared. It only changed form. That belief carried him through loneliness and disappointment. He wasn't bitter, just tired. He had lived through the birth of the modern world and watched it forget its architect. On January 7th, 1943, Tesla died alone in room 3327 of the New Yorker Hotel. He was 86. His body was found by a maid. Among his possessions were trunks of papers, notes, and drawings. Within hours, the FBI seized all his documents. Officially, they were looking for wartime secrets. Unofficially, the government feared what the man might have discovered decades earlier. For years after his death, Tesla was largely forgotten. His name appeared in dusty archives, footnotes, and conspiracy theories. But something began to change. Scientists, engineers, and historians started digging into his work. They realized many of today's technologies, radio, remote control, X-rays, even radar, had roots in Tesla's early ideas. What once sounded like madness now sounded like prophecy. In 1960, the International System of Units honored Tesla by naming the unit of magnetic flux density the Tesla. It was a rare recognition. Most inventors fade into the background, but Tesla's work was too important. He had been right about alternating current, wireless signals, and energy transmission. Time had proven him correct. Then came the resurgence. Documentaries, books, and tributes started appearing. Elon Musk named a car company after him. Statues went up in Serbia and New York. His face appeared on currency. And most importantly, children learned his name in schools again. Not as a madman, but as a pioneer, as one of the greatest minds of all time. Tesla's story became a lesson about vision, sacrifice, and the price of staying true to one's ideals. He gave the world more than inventions. He gave it a roadmap for thinking differently, for believing in things that others couldn't yet see. And though he died alone, he left behind something no one could ever steal: the future. Wardenclyffe never spoke, but the silence of the tower became louder with time. Today, Tesla speaks through every circuit, every current, and every dreamer bold enough to challenge the world.